First, one word I would like to say. Wallace was a nice guy. Yeah. That's very nice what he did. I would like this evening perhaps to talk with you about something else, the discovery of oxygen. You may know it. You know that. Okay, so it's nice to be back in San Sebastian on this occasion. I would like to thank Pedro Echenique. He has been mentioned a lot, and he has had a fantastic influence on what happens in the Basque Country in science. It's nice to be back. It's nice to see him, to see all my friends here. And I will now like to talk about some of the things I have been interested in, but putting it in a much broader sequence. Wait a minute, I have to... So I would like to tell you something about steps towards life and try to convince you that it has much to do with chemistry. For this, we have to start very early and here, very long time ago, because that's where it all started, including Darwin. At the beginning, the universe was very hot. There were no living organisms, there were no molecules, there was just energy. But it cooled down rather quickly, and particles formed. From particles, there were atoms. That's the age of physics, no chemistry, much too hot for chemistry. But then, when the atoms formed, they came together, and they built molecules. Molecules became then more and more complex by sort of random combinations of atoms, and after the age of physics, then chemistry started around here in the evolution of the universe. And this is about here, 300,000 years after the Big Bang. Age of chemistry started. It didn't stop there, of course. More and more molecules were formed. Again, random combinations, obeying, of course, the laws of the universe, of thermodynamics, and so on. And it became more and more complex. They began to make aggregates, and eventually these aggregates led to a more and more complex matter, and some new property appeared, which we still have to understand how, but we will certainly understand it someday. That is, after that, life started on our planet. Maybe somewhere else, almost surely, also somewhere else at some time. And that's the age of biology. It happens that it doesn't stop at that point, at least as we know about. Something new, another property appeared, which is even much more important than life, I feel, which is thought. And as this thinker shows you here, Auguste Rodin, the thinker, that is the most important property of mankind and maybe of some other organisms around the world. Before I continue, let me also stress one thing. This person is sitting at the end of the screen, but it's not the end of evolution. Some people nowadays want to stop things. That is totally impossible. The evolution will continue. The universe doesn't bother about us, and it will continue. We have to try to make the best out of it. That's our problem. So, that are steps towards life, from the Big Bang to a thinking organism. Now, what happens next? Dark. Very dark. Dark energy, dark matter, tell us the cosmologists. 95% darkness. I let them study what that is. But there's 5% visible matter, and that's the matter that matters. This is us. We are part of that. As a chemist, and I suppose also as a biologist, the other things are very important, perhaps, but we are part of this 5%. So we can say that the evolution of matter has started from divided, then it became condensed and organized, then living, then thinking, and will be something else beyond that. It's difficult to think about beyond your thinking, but well, we cannot say that it doesn't exist. And that is a sort of an evolution towards complex matter under the pressure of something that you might call information. Objects have become more and more informed in certain regions. This could be discussed at length, of course. So what is the big question then we should worry about? There is a big question there. The big question is, how does matter become complex? What is the process by which it can evolve from an elementary particle to a thinking organism? And maybe there are even higher forms of complex matter. Mankind created, to answer this question, what we call science, where physics brings in the laws of the universe, the general laws on which everything depends, everything, including Darwin. Biology, the rules of life, these are not laws, these are rules. And chemistry tries to build the bridge between how can very general laws of the universe generate what we know as the more and more complex states of matter. The answer to that is in one word: self-organization. It happened because our universe is constructed in such a way that it will involve to generate organization. And we even agree that this is a cosmic imperative. That it's not an accident. The structure of our universe is such that the rules of the universe, the laws, of the universe are such that it will lead to life. It will lead to thinking. Now, since we heard a lot about evolution, a fantastic talk, very like Sherlock Holmes, you know, like what else is coming? We should say, nevertheless, that there's a prebiotic chemical evolution which has nothing to do with Darwin. You cannot jump from a particle to a thinking organism or to a living organism just like that. There must have been an evolution which was a purely non-living one. And that is the matter of prebiotic chemistry, which I have no time to talk about, but maybe it would be somebody interesting to invite once for some of those events, P4K. And so there must have been an evolution of non-living matter which pre-existed biological Darwinian evolution, and in some respects Darwinian evolution. We now know from DNA and all that it is also chemical. We come back to that. So what is chemistry? Usually it's considered as a science of the structure and transformation of non-living and living matter. And along the years then, scientists have tried to understand what are these pieces which make up the structure, and also what are the ways in which one can transform that matter. It happens that there's a person in the middle of the 19th century, here also one could say who else thought about, but I haven't time to get into that. Dmitry Mendeleev in 1869 published a very famous paper, I would consider as famous as the Book of Darwin, and as important, which is this one. He found that there's a relationship between the properties and the atomic weights of the elements, and this allowed him to set up a table. Here is the table in the original paper in 1869, where he showed that there's a regularity. One can classify all these elements, which at that time were known, and there are even question marks, because he said, there's a hole there. We don't know it yet, but we will discover it. That was also a point which he had brought up. He saw further than only what he had been collecting. He saw there's something there, there's something behind it. And that's, again, very important in science. This is a periodic table of elements, and it's 150th anniversary this year. It's a very important date for science. And this table is now this. These are the bricks of matter. It's the periodic table of the elements. And let me stress, I like to stress that usually, always, these are the bricks of which everything in our universe is made in visible matter. That means if there's any organism anywhere in the universe, billions of light years away, the same elements will build it up. Isn't that fantastic? That we sit in this room and we can say that anywhere in the universe, it's the same pieces which will make up matter. We can discuss why, because it's just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 proton, 2 protons, 3 protons, 1 electron, 2 electrons, 3 electrons in the atoms. That's it. There's nothing between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and so 5. It's just counting. And that is the playground of chemistry. That's what we play with. Chemists are children. they like these building things, Lego sets, and they rearrange them. They make all these objects out of them, and that's the playground. That is why I like chemistry. So from these elements, atoms were made into molecules. And this led to the development of molecular chemistry, where atoms are linked strongly together by what chemists like to call covalent bonds, strong bonding. And we might look at two milestones. I could have cited, of course, many other milestones, but two milestones in molecular chemistry, which are, on one hand, first of all, in 1828, the synthesis, the production in the laboratory of urea, which was an achievement in chemistry, but also, so to say, in philosophy, because at that time people were thinking that if you want to produce any piece, any molecule which is present in a living organism, you need the vital force, sort of a magic force. Wöhler in Germany was well aware that by producing urea in the laboratory, he had destroyed the vital force. And there was nothing different in essence between normal molecules and molecules in living organisms. 150 years later or so, this very big molecule, vitamin B12, was made by the efforts combined of two groups, one Robert Woodward at Harvard, and the other one Albert Eschenmoser in Zurich. And this is a much more complex molecule, and you realize that, of course, a lot of progress had been made in molecular chemistry in these years. It still is a very active field of science. Molecular chemistry is developing, and now one would not make vitamin B12 by the same ways in which it has been made at that time. In fact, I was postdoc with Woodward, and that is my piece here in that synthesis, but altogether there were 120 collaborators or something like that across the Atlantic. So molecular chemistry is continuing. Lots of new reactions have been found, new compounds have been made, new drugs, new materials, and so on. But then one can ask another question, which I can start by bringing into focus by looking at biology. Here we see a cancer cell in blue and two killer cells colored in pink or whatever. And the cancer cells, the killer cells have to destroy the cancer cell, which means they have to recognize the cancer cell. They have to know that that guy is a cancer cell, which I have to destroy. How do they know? Similarly, when the HIV virus hits a white blood cell, it can penetrate. How does the virus know that it has reached the target? Something must happen between these bodies, big bodies, so to say, compared to a molecule, which are defined by a membrane, and in this membrane, there are molecules sitting there which represent sort of the hands or the eyes of this object. So something must happen between them. And this is a chemistry then, which is sort of chemistry which happens between molecules and not in molecules. And that has something to do with the fact that molecular chemistry leads to a chemistry which we have liked to call supramolecular, because it lies beyond the molecule. It's a chemistry which exists between molecular objects. It's a sort of a sociology, a population of molecules, where molecules go together, they like each other, they hate each other, they recognize each other. And this has been developed over the last 50 years by looking at the weak interactions between molecules, and the three main properties which have been studied. The functions are molecular recognition, that's the basis of it. Reactivity, how do they react with one another? How can they carry one another through a barrier like a cell membrane? Now, this molecular recognition is, of course, the most basic process. You would not exist without molecular recognition. All these nice living organisms would be chaotic. Each molecule in your body, as you sit here, they do the job to recognize one another, to do what they have to do at the right time, at the right speed, in the right place. Now, what is this molecular recognition? Can one simplify how one can present it? First of all, it needs interaction. They have to feel it. These molecules have to feel one another. Otherwise, they ignore each other. But that's not enough. You need information. You cannot have recognition without information. So for selecting something, for selecting the cancer cell among the healthy cells, the killer cells have to have information. And this resides in molecules which are present in the membrane of these entities. And it can be most simply defined as a double complementarity in geometry and interactions. And again, this was something said long time ago. We heard about going back and trying to find out, which was Emil Fischer. Emil Fischer in 1894 had written a paper where he said that for an enzyme to act on its substrate, they have to fit together like Schloss und Schlüssel, a lock and a key. Fantastic insight. Of course, we now know these things adjust a bit and all that, but basically that's correct. Maybe also in terms of modern politics. He got his PhD in Strasbourg in 1874. At that time, we were German, because this was still the time where there was no Europe. Now we are all Europeans. Okay? I like to say that. It's usually my motto. Okay, now, what is the most complex information machine, so to say? Obviously, the storage of information in the genome. What makes the species, what makes these transformations from one to another. And this is something, it's a long string of information bits which are stored in chemical groups. Trivial chemical groups. Adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine, these are very small things for chemists. No big deal. But they are the 4 letters which write the genome of all living organisms, which make the difference between a tomato and an elephant. And it's well known that this long string they can wrap around each other, giving this famous double helix. Now let's have a look at one of those letters, adenine. Adenine is just a combination of 5 HCN. HCN is a very simple molecule. 5 HCN make adenine. HCN, this is a bit rearranged, but 5 HCN are enough. It's a pentamer of HCN. And this exists in interstellar space. Some water, you can make guanine, and some other transformations, you make the 2 other ones. Now, this is the storage of information. How do you read it? The reading is also rather simple. These letters can pair up by 2 points of interaction or 3 points of interaction represented by the small dots. So just this 2, 3, 2, 3, like in a computer, 0, 1, 0, 1, that makes the computer on which the origin of species depends. And so you can also ask, why is just 4 letters? Why only 2 ways? I guess because it's enough. Maybe nature had tried out, evolution had tried out 10 letters, 5 pairing modes, probably chaotic, much too complicated. But 4 letters, 2 combinations, that is enough. Now, chemistry is therefore also an information science. It's a science of informed matter. The information is stored in the molecules, and it is processed at the level of the supramolecular entities, where they get to one another, they touch each other, they read one another, and so on. This then led to a very widely practiced evolution of chemistry, and many studies were performed then over the years in many laboratories, sort of playing with locks, playing with keys, and trying then to understand how this molecular works and how it can be used over the years and the last 50 years or so. Some applications, very briefly, because in basic research you acquire knowledge, but you would also like to apply it. And one basic, most important application is, of course, drug design. A drug is a molecular key for a biological lock, and you want to make it as specific as possible. This is very important for drug design. One can make diagnostic entities, one can make a variety of chemical entities which are able to act as labels, as markers, and so on. Also, I have mentioned that another function which is important is the transport through a membrane. And gene transfer can be performed by making molecules which take a piece of DNA and help to go through a membrane that is of great interest for gene transfer and for biotechnology, for making genetically modified organisms. Here again, I advocate genetically modified organisms. We need them, we will use them, and despite the fact that some people are opposing them, it will win and will go through because we need them. We know, and therefore we will use. Finally, also biomaterials may be produced on the supramolecular level. Let me just give you an example of that, which sort of illustrates how this field which develops can lead to applications in areas which are not at the beginning part of the game, part of the plan. There are some polymers which were made of supramolecular nature, and in 1990 we published the first ones of those. It took then many years, 23 years, until it was used by a small company for making cardiovascular implants for children who had a heart disease, a genetic heart disease. And this is the first young girl who was then implanted by a compound, it was a sort of a membrane for reconstructing their heart in 2013. Again, another interesting thing with science. This was done in Moscow by Leo Bukiria. And the compounds were studied in our group, and the company was in Holland, and so on. Now, this has been then developed further. Many children have been implanted since then, and they have now also made heart valves for a number of other people who have been also implanted in Budapest, Krakow, and Kuala Lumpur. People tell me that's a breakthrough in surgical practice, and of course, when you have done the basic work for it, you are very happy about that. Now, beyond pre-organization, that means building up objects with a given plan, with a given purpose. I want to make something which recognizes spheres, or which recognizes tetrahedra, which recognizes flat molecules, and so on. Then the question is, can this knowledge also be used for getting into self-organization? Defining self-organization as the spontaneous build-up of complex entities, but information control. That means the way you design the bricks is determining what will be the result, and you want to understand that. I can take an example of biology, which of course we are self-organized, and the tobacco mosaic virus is one example, the first virus which was well understood, of a thing where an architecture builds up spontaneously from its pieces. These pieces are about 2,130 protein units, which automatically get together, build up this helical tower with a hole in the middle where there is the RNA, the genome of the virus, and this happens spontaneously because the surface of these pieces, of these 230 proteins, are just what is needed to get together, to assemble in a given way, and to generate the final entity. These are sort of, you may call, programmed systems where the pieces are programmed for assembling in a given way. And it is also some interesting feature of, for instance, the use in nanotechnology, because you would like ultimately to go from the brick to the device. And that is a sort of the ultimate fabrication, which is of importance for nanoscience and nanotechnology. Let me just show you a few which have been made of this and in the laboratory. So many people, many laboratories have started and are still continuing to try to make bricks and cementing them together by various interactions. The bricks are usually organic molecules, well designed, and the interactions are either interactions between organic molecules or cementing units like metal ions, like zinc or copper or cobalt or iron. And here are some examples from our work, but there are many others now around. And for instance, the Nobel Prize also in 2016 had a lot to do with this way of assembling these architectures, which are called metallo-supramolecular, because they bring together molecules and metal ions. You can make a double helix, you can make a triple helix, you can make a grid where at each intersection of the molecules, which are horizontal and vertical, there's a little silver ion sitting there holding it together. You can make cylinders like this one, where you take long molecules, flat molecules, you add the other ions, and spontaneously you get it. It happens just by that. And of course, there are many others you can make. This is just a selection which are just showing the kind of things one can do. So this was the chemistry, and is still the chemistry of design, and is widely pursued in many laboratories, where you handle molecular information, where you want to program the system, and in order to come out with a controlled generation of functional molecular and supramolecular entities. But then comes another way, and I think I come back, I'm very happy that of the previous talk, because this is design. But what about selection? Can we make systems where the system by itself will pick up from what is there, from the environment, from the bricks it finds in the environment, what it needs to build itself up? For that you need diversity, you need dynamics, because if it's too sticky, then of course it will get together, and first encounter will stick them together, and there will be no evolution or adaptation. And so this is now a chemistry which has developed in the last 12 years, where one tries to make systems which select the right pieces for building themselves up from a diversity of possible pieces present in the environment. This led then to the idea that the chemistry in question is dynamic in its constitution. I would like just to insist a little bit on that. It's not just dynamic in the way they operate, the way they move, but it's dynamic in the object itself. It can fall apart, reconstitute, and fall apart. And by reconstituting it, it may change the pieces and sort of evolve to something else. This is dynamic chemistry in its constitution that can allow for adaptation, and now this field of adaptive chemistry is developing. Now, if I may summarize at this stage, I haven't time to go more into this adaptive chemistry, so our main activity right now. But let me just say in one sentence, it's the chemistry of chemical systems where the object which is formed can adapt and respond to changes in the environment. So the evolution of chemistry would start with molecular, that becomes supramolecular, populations, and organized, dynamic, so as to be able to search around, have a searching project, become adaptive, and getting closer and closer to living matter. Let me, I'm well in town, huh, Pedro? Yeah, he was afraid that I would go over like usual, but I was very careful this time. Thank you, thank you. You frighten me. So let's have some comments on chemistry itself. What is the essence of chemistry from what you have seen? It's not just to discover what's around, but to create new things which don't exist yet. The book of chemistry must be written, not only to be read. Of course, we want to read it. We want to read what is around. But there are many things which have not been attempted, which has not been made, possibly because the cause of the evolution hasn't asked the question, so there was no answer provided. But we can ask questions, and we can provide the answers. So the score of chemistry, we must compose it, not just play it. So chemistry has a great creative power. And again, I would like to show this by one of my favorite artists, Auguste Rodin. Here you see at the end of the heart is bringing out of the stone sculpture which was not in the stone. The stone has not the ideas, the artist which makes it. And in that way also, one may say that chemistry is the art of matter. It's the way in which you, from the stones, from the elements, you can then build a whole universe of things, which only depend on the imagination of the scientist. Now this, again, if we go back in history, was maybe not such a new idea. Because Leonardo da Vinci, that was even before, when you go back from Darwin to his predecessors, this was very much before. He wrote a sentence which you can, of course, interpret in modern ways, but it was nevertheless a very, very profound one. Where nature finishes to produce its own species, we are part of that. Man begins using natural things, the periodic table of the elements, in harmony with his very nature, the laws of physics, of course. And then comes the ending. And for somebody who was a scientist, an engineer, and an artist, the ending is fantastic. To create an infinity of species. Man can claim even gene transfer is mentioned, CRISPR-Cas9, modifying human beings, modifying animals. Let's also say it's the 500th anniversary of the death of Leonardo this year. So with both Mendeleev and Leonardo in the game, I think it's a nice year. It's a good year. Now, let's have a look at some history, some mythology. As you know, Prometheus is said to have stolen the fire of knowledge from the gods and to give it to mankind. Here he's running away, looking over his shoulder and seeing if the other guys are not running after him to catch him. But they didn't catch him. And here he is, brandishing the fire of knowledge. But we cannot give it back. What we know, and our path will lead us from the quest of knowledge to the control of our destiny. What we know, we cannot erase it. Unless you blow up the whole earth, of course. Then it's erased. But there's some other entities much more intelligent than us on another planet. We probably do better. So, controlling our destiny. And that means also transmission. In the past, the transmission looked a little bit like this. In the present, we could say that it looks like that. Michelangelo, yes? What about the future? What would it be in the future? Maybe this. Now, I don't mean by that we will only talk to robots, but we will modify ourselves. And many in this room are modified. Maybe you have new lenses in your eyes, you have new teeth, you have some titanium in your hip. And even to the end of it, if you have a heart transplant, you cannot tell your wife, I give you my heart. It's not yours anymore. It's just a pump. And we are just pieces put together. And François Jacob would say by molecular tinkering, sort of getting things together, seeing how it functions. If it's a bit better, it continues. So it's just to say that we will try in the future, and I'm quite convinced of it, to control ourselves, our destiny. And I even would say we have to do it. We know better and better how to do it. I'm sure we will do it, even if we have to do it in a controlled way. But it cannot be eradicated. Let me finish with a mathematician, David Hilbert. I haven't said much about mathematics except counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's very basic mathematics. David Hilbert is buried in Göttingen. And on his tombstone, he wanted to have 2 sentences written. They are there. What are they? Wir müssen wissen. We must know. That's only the start. It's already something we have to know. But then comes a sort of a proof, a sort of a confidence in what science is doing. Wir werden wissen. We will know. This can be discussed. We can say, how far can we know, and all that. Irrelevant of this, it's a very strong statement, and I think it's what drives all of us scientists. We will know from the knowledge acquired by science, and all of you in the room, I would like to tell you, please participate. Science shares the future of humanity. Please participate. Thank you.